times. Queer times. Queer times.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Kristen Becker. Welcome to Queer Times.
And I'm Harrison Fish.
And we're going to talk about the fuckery that is a muckery.
Yeah.
Specifically in regards to Harvard.
Yeah, just like general Trump nonsense.
General overreach. There's been a lot of things. Not that I ever want this to be the only thing we talk about, but some things are too big to ignore.
Yeah.
And I feel like when we're dealing with breaking news, we have to acknowledge the elephants in the room.
Yeah. And it's also one of those things that, like, obviously I heard about these things happening, but I didn't know a lot of the details until I sat down to really get all the details to talk about it here. And on the surface, I was like, oh, that's crazy. And then the more I read about it, I'm like, oh no, it's crazy.
And I'm going to be honest with you, as someone, two things you should know about me. Growing up, I always had a Harvard sweatshirt because I was convinced I was going to go to Harvard Law, but never, as I became closer to college age, did it ever occur to me. But as a child, I really romanced the idea of going to Harvard.
Yeah.
And number two, as a grown-up, I can't believe I'm here defending an institution with billions of dollars in endowment. And I would, as someone who rails against secondary education being so expensive and believing that student loans are a ripoff and all of those things, I'm shocked that I am the person here who's about to defend Harvard.
Yeah. And also, it's like, it's not even about defending Harvard so much, because I understand and kind of agree with you on a lot of those things that you just mentioned. But I feel like it's also about this, all of those things should be criticized without the president jumping in and running amok, and
without the government overreaching into an institution, which is supposed to be the thing that conservatives hate. They're supposed to hate government overreach. Yet again, here we are.
Yeah.
In a situation where the government has determined. And what an interesting intersection.
Yeah. Well, if there's one thing that Republicans hate even more than government overreach, it's educated people.
Wow. Wow. Coming in hot.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you tell us where this began?
Okay. So Harvard University, it's so hard to say where it began, because it's like, whose angle do you take it from? And also, do you take what they're saying as face value?
I think we can go back to saying that there was obviously, prior to this last election, an uptick on conservatives attacking what are considered elite schools, trying to take down deans, getting people to resign. This has been part of the rights movement, is to hit liberal Ivy colleges in an attempt to change the fact that, from their perspective, high-level education means liberal education.
I mean, it's a proven fact and statistic that the more educated you are, generally the more left-leaning your views are.
When you say it's a proven statistic, can you find me that one? I'm not saying it's not. I'm just also like, is it a proven?
Well, yeah, college-educated people generally
are more smart. Are more smart.
I guess
are
that's
more
true.
Smart.
I was going to say college-educated people are more likely to vote left.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But obviously, like you said, like Ivy League institutions, higher education is very much like Republicans and the right hate it because they think it's like this hotbed for like liberal ideology, and like it's brainwash. Like they've rebranded being educated as being brainwashed.
And I think it's hilarious that these are people who actually have places like Liberty University, which are those things. And that's part of why I think they believed that, because so much of their education is indoctrination,
right?
That they can't help but assume that the lefts must be doing it the same way, and therefore we are at war.
Yeah, very true. But the reason Trump and his administration have given for these actions that they've been taking against Harvard is that they're saying that the school and the president are creating an environment on the campus that is rife with anti-Semitism.
Correct. But it started in January when there was a DEI crackdown, and Harvard resisted that. And then in February, they said, oh, you know what? Okay, then we're going to visit 10 elite universities and root out anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
That was step 2.
And also, mind you, the president of Harvard is Jewish.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And then in March, they cut like $400 million of federal funding specifically to Columbia, which we know that Columbia, it was the Columbia dean that stepped down, right? There was a whole lot of this regarding anti-Semitism in the last, prior to this election.
And also, like, where these claims of anti-Semitism are coming from are from these protests that have been happening on campus in regards to the situation happening in Israel and Palestine. And I mean, this is a whole other topic that we can maybe talk about at some other point, but the idea that...
Oh, you think the two of us should dive into Gaza?
I mean, not who knows?
I mean, yes. I mean, obviously, but also, okay.
I guess what I want to say is that, like, a group of people saying that there is a genocide happening in Gaza when the people are being denied food, they're having their hospitals blown up. Personally, I feel like criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic.
Right. I mean, I think that in a country that believes in free speech, if you are a free speech absolutist, it means you are allowed to criticize Israel.
I mean, when you look at the way that, like, AIPAC has this incredible sway over U.S. politics and how involved Israel is.
What is AIPAC?
It is a political action group that uses money in elections in order to push the Israeli agenda.
Okay.
Basically, with how intertwined the American government and the Israeli government is, I think they're using this idea of, like, anti-Semitism is horrible, and they're labeling anyone who goes against Israel, this country, and speaks up for the Palestinian people as anti-Semitic, because it's hard to argue against it, because everyone agrees that anti-Semitism is bad.
Correct. Anti-Semitism is bad.
Right. And so to label all of this as anti-Semitism, even though I feel like if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, you'd be like, oh, it's not necessarily anti-Semitism. And I'm not saying that there isn't constant anti-Semitism happening all over the country and the world, but I'm saying in these instances, to label all of these people protesting against a genocide as anti-Semitic, I think is wholly incorrect.
Were Jewish students attacked at Harvard? Multiple sources report incidents involving Jewish students at Harvard University. In particular, one incident that has garnered significant attention involves an Israeli-American student who was reportedly harassed and physically assaulted by protesters at a campus event. And people were shouting shame and blocking his path. My question is, and it was reported from multiple angles. Okay, so what you're saying is that if one person is actually assaulted, that's enough to pull funding from an entire organization. And I will also say the amount of Jewish comedians that built a career on I can say whatever I want, who are now trying to censor anyone who disagrees, is hilarious. I've literally watched people be like, I can say whatever I want, I'm a comic. And then watching people like, no, either everyone says what they want to say, even if it offends you, or no one gets to say anything except what the government approves. Those are the options at this point.
Right.
I don't really care what side you land on, but if your entire career up until now has been about how lighten up, snowflake, people can say what they want to say, and then the minute it actually hurts your heart, everyone needs to shut up.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I guess when it comes to this report of this Israeli-American student who was harassed, and this, I guess that I'm going to pose this as a question. Does harassing someone for being Israeli while the Israeli government commits genocide anti-Semitic?
Yes.
Why?
Because that Jewish person is not in the Israeli army shooting people. I think that it would be... But
we're assuming because they're Israeli, they are Jewish.
I feel like holding someone accountable who is not an active participant based only on their race or ethnicity is a problem. We didn't hold every Catholic accountable,
right,
for the abuse that happened in the church.
But I guess,
and while it's not a genocide,
so this group was out protesting. This Israeli person was walking on their way to class, and someone went, "That person's Israeli, get him!" Or was there some sort of escalation?
As in, was
this Israeli person speaking up and saying that? You know what I mean? Did they show up and go,
Palestinians are all terrorists?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what if they did?
Then they're being harassed for their viewpoint, not for their religion.
They're both being equally harassed.
Yeah. And they're harassing each other because of their viewpoints, not because of their religion.
I'm of the mentality that things might get difficult around you, and trying to define where the line is between you feeling afraid and you actually being in danger, I think is really interesting, right? Because I also think that if you're a member of the Jewish community going to college at Harvard, you are not responsible for a genocide.
Right.
And I think that there is a misplaced aggression towards Jewish Americans who might be in school, who maybe you want them to do more or whatever. But I think that is a very scary thing to just be going about your day miles and miles away, and perhaps not even that much of a religious Jew, right? And you're kind of going about your business and having insults and slurs hurled at you. Problem, scary, anti-Semitic. Is that more dangerous than the gay kid being called a faggot? I don't know, right? And so I think it's interesting that the way we are policing speech is policing it when it only affects a certain group of people and not policing it generally, and then hiding under free speech when you want to drop an N-bomb or you want to use a homophobic slur or a transphobic slur. Where was all this federal protection for other groups of people? I'm not saying that Jewish people shouldn't have it. I'm just saying, where is it for everybody else? Let's protect everybody then.
Yeah.
And then all of the free speech goes out the window, and then it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Right?
Where was this idea when Nancy Mace was screaming slurs for trans people in Congress?
Right. Exactly. Where was that?
Right. Also, protests are designed to make people around them uncomfortable. And if they're not doing that, they're fairly pointless. So I wonder if there is an uncomfortability attached to it that then is construed as violence,
I think that we live in such a comfortable society in many ways. If you are upper middle class, you are disconnected from real suffering in a day-to-day food scarcity way, housing scarcity way. And I wonder if, when just feeling a little bit of discomfort doesn't necessarily mean you're in actual physical danger. And I feel like that's something that we probably need to dive a little bit more into, frankly, as American people, as a society.
Definitely.
What else I thought was really interesting was there's a judge who just expanded her order to protect Harvard from the Trump block on enrolling international students.
He's done a lot of things to Harvard. He's told multiple federal agencies to cut $9 billion in contracts and grants from the school. They froze $2.2 billion of school's federal funding this past April. They're trying to make it so that Harvard can't enroll international students.
They're trying to make it so they can't enroll international students. They're also toying with the idea of removing their tax-exempt status.
Right.
And have them be taxed as a political entity, because educating about anything other than the administration's agreed upon agenda is considered political. So I want you all to listen.
It's crazy.
What they're saying is that if you get educated in a way that the administration disagrees with, it's a political agenda.
Yeah, and also a reminder, if any church or religious organization says anything about politics, elections, voting, they are to no longer be allowed to be tax exempt.
That's not what happens anymore.
No, I know it doesn't happen, but that is the truth of it.
I will tell you that what some of you may know, what some of you don't know, is that while I am a comedian, I am also the founder of a not-for-profit, Summer of Sass, and we specifically help young LGBTQ folks between the ages of 18 and 20, grown-ups, well, baby grown-ups, but legal adults in this country find a sense of self. And I will tell you that I have on more than one occasion been terrified at the next 2 years because it feels as though if you're doing anything to help anyone who is not a straight white Christian trying to make babies, it's only a matter of time until they try to do something and take away your not-for-profit status or prevent the work that you're doing. This whole thing to me is terrifying in a way that should be terrifying to everyone. And if it's not, I do believe that once the president starts meddling, number one, I'm excited that it's Harvard because they have money. They have the kind of money that can fight this. And I'm honestly impressed that the government thought they could take on Harvard, quite frankly. Because I'm shocked they didn't start with someone with a little bit of a smaller endowment.
Yeah, like one of the...
I guess Columbia they did, but you know.
Like one of the most impressive law schools in the world. One of the most ridiculous things is they demanded a list of international students and the countries in which they come from. And Harvard responded and was like, that's already a thing.
You already have that?
Yeah, you already have that
information. They love to make drama. So here's an interesting thing. So the judge just stopped the ban on enrolling international students.
Right.
But I think that at times we say, wow, this administration is stupid. And they're not. Not only are they not stupid, they're ruthless and they're shameless. And I will take a bit of shameless. Like, I feel like a little bit of shamelessness is more impactful than intelligence.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So this has now been blocked. This is what they want. They wanted this to be blocked because now they can take it to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And Judge Burroughs, who is the federal district court who made this ruling, is in Massachusetts, who is not doing enough, by the way, Massachusetts, the state that we live in, who's letting the federal government run all over us. Nominated by Obama in 2014. So these are all the reasons that this administration will say that the judge is biased, right? Like when there's a reason why it's Harvard. And I think, I really believe they're picking on Massachusetts because if they can do it here, they can do it anywhere. Because we are the bluest state. We do have a pretty solid social network, right? Like we have healthcare. Gay marriage has been at the cutting edge. We are one of the most progressive states. And I just find I went and found the questioning of this judge when she was confirmed to the federal court. And one thing really stuck out to me. And it said, what would you do if you believe the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals? I think this was Chuck Grassley that asked this in 2014 to the judge. What would you do if you believe the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals had seriously erred in rendering a decision? Would you apply that decision or would you use your best judgment of the merits to decide the case? And her response was, if confirmed, I would apply binding precedent of the Supreme Court and the First Circuit, regardless of my personal views. So this case is now in a judge's hands who they have on record saying, even if you don't agree with the Supreme Court, if they say you have to, that's going to be what it is, right? And I just found that really interesting that I feel like they know which federal judges to go under. They know what jurisdiction. There are a reason why certain cases appear in certain district courts and certain federal courts.
But does the Trump administration have any more ground to stand on saying like, oh, what the Supreme Court says has to, like what they say goes? They've ignored so much of it already.
I don't think they have ignored so much of it already. I think they've gotten their way in a lot of the cases. I think there's been one or two where he said something and then Chief Justice Roberts went,
Well, I mean, they demanded that they bring back certain people that have been sent to that El Salvadorian prison. And they were basically like, we're not going to do that. In an interview recently, they asked Donald Trump if it was his responsibility to uphold the Constitution. And he said, I don't know, even though that is expressly a major point in being sworn in as president.
Real quick, 2 hours ago, the Supreme Court allows Trump to strip humanitarian parole of 500,000 people from 4 countries. So actually, the Supreme Court yet again cleared the way to strip temporary legal protections. So the Supreme Court is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, and this is why people told you, but her emails wasn't the answer.
Right.
Because now the Supreme Court is stacked. The administration is full of lawlessness. And I guess the only thing that stands between us and them is Harvard University right now, currently standing up to an administration.
I mean, maybe in the future.
Okay.
Whenever we have a democratically controlled Senate, House, and president like we had in 2020.
And we did nothing with it?
Maybe it's time to have those people step down and then maybe not have people on their deathbeds as Supreme Court justices so that they die during a Trump presidency, and then we get this.
Wait.
Here I go being ageist again.
I was like, you are back to being ageist. What you're saying is that the Supreme Court is too old. I don't think that the Supreme Court should be a lifetime appointment in the same way that...
Oh, I agree. But I just like, it's like we're foolish in so many instances. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was almost 90 years old.
Yeah.
Like maybe when we had all that democratically controlled House, Senate, and presidency, we could have been like, hey, maybe step down
Ruth.
and we could get a 45-year-old in here.
Here's the thing I'm not going to do. I'm not going to sit by while you slander RBG.
I love our RBG, but it's a dangerous game that we lost.
No, it is a dangerous game, but I don't blame RBG because there is no way that Hillary should have lost.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And so I think that all that happened was she was working, RBG was just under the assumption that Hillary would get in, she would retire, that would be that. That's not what happened. She went to the gym every morning, Harrison. She was doing everything she could to stay alive through the Trump presidency.
Yeah.
And then that didn't happen because 90.
Right.
But you're correct. If she would have been out in like when she was 70.
What are we
Clinton
doing?
would have been in office.
What are we doing?
Well, I mean, I think in everyone's defense, we didn't used to live this long. You know, like it takes a while for us to catch up and adapt to what's going on. But fortunately, the American lifespan is becoming shorter every day. And so thanks to our lack of healthcare funding, nutritional value in any of our school lunches, general education. But I got to tell you that today feels heavy and harder than usual. And I don't know if it's a culmination.
For me, it's a culmination. I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can't wrap my brain around everything that's happening anymore. And that makes me want to stop trying.
So from May 13th until May 22nd, May 13th, the U.S. Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism announces another $450 million in federal funding to combat anti-Semitism. That's great. We love that. The DOJ announces it will use the False Claims Act, typically used to punish federal funding recipients accused of corruption, to crack down on universities like Harvard over DEI policies.
Crazy.
So basically, they're going to take an act, the False Claims Act, and try to apply it to any university that is practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and saying that those are false claims. And they're also going to terminate $60 million in federal grants to Harvard. And then on May 22nd, Kristi Noem, who we love, that's the one who stands in front of a bunch of
so messed up.
That was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. They've decided that they're going to revoke the student and exchange visitor program. Now, what they're saying is you can no longer have international students here. Right? That's basically what they're saying at Harvard.
Why is that? Why is that what they're going after?
I think it's a big revenue generator for Harvard. You know, generally international students pay more than American students. That's kind of, at least when I was an international student in Canada, I paid more than the Canadian students, you know? So I think that's a huge part of it, is it's a really, number one, it's the power they have.
Right.
And I believe they're only interested in just figuring out how to best use the power they have to inflict pain and
Right.
suffering on
But I mean,
anyone who
they're also
disagrees
not
with them.
above making up powers that they don't have.
Right.
I mean, stripping tax exempt status from something like a school, it's typically a process that the IRS handles, and it's typically apolitical. And the executive branch is specifically prohibited by federal law from influencing IRS audits and investigations. So, like, they specifically do not have the power to remove tax exempt status.
Correct. But none of those things matter anymore.
No, exactly.
And I think that we just can only continue to be smarter, and we have to find our shamelessness in matters of politics. Like we have to, there is no longer, well, that's not right. Because it's all gone now. Like they are in the process of breaking it down.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we are not afraid of taking bold steps in new directions that makes them go, wait, what? Right? Like we keep going, what? They did what? They did what? And it's time for us to dish it back.
When you say us, what do you mean?
I mean, sane people.
Okay.
I mean, people who can clearly see what's happening right now. I think people who recognize that democracy is at risk in this moment. And I think people who, quite frankly, if we can motivate the middle and the lower middle class.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think paying attention to what's happening at Harvard is a big indicator of where this is going to go. So I'm very interested and terrified to see where this goes, because attacking higher education is like a standard play in the fascist playbook.
They want you to only teach. I will look right into the camera. What this administration is saying is they only want you to teach what they want you to teach. That is fascism. There's no way around it. That is propaganda. That is government control. It is the opposite of freedom. And if you think otherwise, you're wrong.
And also, I feel like what frustrates me so much is the Trump administration, anyone and anything who doesn't agree with them and support their ideals is biased.
Because these are the arguments of spoiled children.
Yeah.
We are literally dealing with a spoiled child who, when you disagree, they throw a fit, they misdirect, they project, they yell in all caps. Like we are literally dealing with a child bully. 90% of that party is afraid of the bully.
Right.
And and I think that's why last week I was like, no, people who aren't afraid of the bully, we have to encourage even if we don't agree with them. Because I know, but you have to. Somebody's got to be brave enough to punch a bully, even though they know the bully's coming back with 4 of their friends. An article just came out from the BBC that said more than 2,000 Harvard students identify as Jewish. And for some of those from overseas, the rhetoric has stirred fear and uncertainty. A quote from a PhD student is, "I thought when I left Israel, I was leaving a conflict zone." If President Donald Trump says he's punishing Harvard University to protect Jewish students, not everybody is convinced. I think that, yet again, the government is happy to use any humans as pawns in their Project 2025 agenda. So there are 25% of Harvard's enrollment is from abroad. So that's a large hit.
Yeah, definitely.
There's also, just for what it's worth, there are no exceptions for Israelis or other international Jewish students.
What do you mean?
The international student program is done.
Oh, and
even if you're from Israel.
That's shocking.
As of right now, I'm also surprised. I think the part that we can't quite reconcile is that we all know that Stephen Miller is kind of a white supremacist. And when you have a white supremacist running things, the idea that their real goal is to protect Jewish people is a stretch. And I think the craziest thing that's ever happened, obviously, I've said to you, we have Sassers who come in from, maybe they were in the middle of the country and they were from an evangelical Christian family or something. And then they discover the Jewish faith and they discover the accepting, welcoming community of the Jewish community. And they convert to Judaism because it's more accepting of the LGBTQ identity. And it almost feels like the white supremacists in the White House have figured out a way to use the Jewish identity as a weapon. And in the end, they're not going to want to see the Jewish community succeed either, because this all goes back to white supremacy. And that's terrifying. But it does feel like, to me, that's what this game feels like. It feels like, wow, you managed to turn a liberal religion conservative.
Right.
I mean, obviously, I don't understand Judaism enough to pontificate about it, but I do know that if you're not Orthodox, all I know is my experience with the Jewish community has always been one of openness and accepting, particularly of the queer community.
There's obviously a lot more to come on that issue in the coming days. So
I'm excited to see what happens next.
Yeah. And also it might happen before this airs.
All right. So that's it for breaking news this week.
Yeah.
I think we covered it a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of you are going to be mad. I'm excited to hear about it.
Right.
Follow us, like us, subscribe, Queer Times Pod, TikTok, IG, YouTube, Apple, Spotify.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into some...
I think we're talking about Pride now.
It is the Pride episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, because...
I got my Pride nails.
You do have your Pride nails. That's gay.
Yeah.
I have my lesbian... Actually, they need a trim. I'm going to keep...
You just have really short lesbian nails?
I just have really short lesbian nails, yeah. Queer is in. Let's talk about Pride. June is a comin'.
Yeah.
Here's June. What do you know about Pride? Where was your first Pride?
My first Pride was in Boston.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Fancy.
Did the parade, the block party. Yours?
Dallas, Texas.
Ooh.
90s. Drove from Shreveport or Natchitoches somewhere, drove to Dallas, went to Pride, met a cute girl, got a tattoo. True story.
Let's see it.
Like it's covered up now, actually.
Oh, you covered that tattoo?
I covered that tattoo. Yeah, it was
what was it of?
It was a problematic tattoo. It was apparently a Chinese character.
Apparently,
that they told me meant like real or true or sincere,
Hell
like
yeah.
Authenticity.
Hell yeah.
Could have meant popcorn for all I know.
Right.
I have no idea. But I thought it was funny to have a real tattoo that meant real. And there was a girl there and I wanted to impress her. And so I got the tattoo. And it has now been covered up with, it's actually a microphone in like a gun holster on my ankle. So like that. My weapon is a microphone.
I love that.
Yeah. But yeah, so that has been covered up. But that was my first.
It's a very 90s story.
It was it was like somebody's friend who we all rode there. So we're in the car together for a while. And I was like, wow, cute.
Yeah.
Flirty.
I'm just so chill and
I'm just gonna go get a tattoo.
Why not get a tattoo?
Yeah, let's like whatever. I'm not afraid of that. No idea who that was or that's the only memory I have. But
I love that.
Yeah, it was going to the big city to go to a Pride.
So Pride Month is June.
Yeah.
And Pride was kind of developed in 1970. It was basically the commemoration of the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots. Pride marches were held in New York, LA, and Chicago, and thousands of LGBTQ plus people gathered to demonstrate for equal rights.
I do think we need to say that it wasn't the first uprising.
No.
And I think that's important because you can go back to the Compton uprising in San Francisco, which was like August of '66, and it was a diner where queer folks it was in the Tenderloin district, and queer folks would be at this diner after shows. It was a 24 hours place. And there was an uprising there first. So I just think, I always want to make sure that people know that, yes, Stonewall is, everyone says the first Pride was a riot and it was, but there were riots before that one too, right?
Actually, I'm reading this here that a lot of Pride traditions were adapted from other previous riots that had happened in protests, most specifically the Reminder Day pickets.
I don't know about those.
Basically, picketing for gay rights. It was organized in 1962 on East Coast homophile groups, which included the New York chapter of the Daughters of Bilitis, the Janus Society in Philadelphia, and the Mattachine Society in Washington and New York.
Yeah, the Compton's cafeteria riot was August 15th, 1966, and then going into Stonewall, June 28th, 1969, and then the first Gay Pride Week, June 28th, 1970 was the first commemoration of the Stonewall in New York.
Yeah.
And then San Francisco Pride happened in 72. So the first one of those. So then that's when we're starting to see like the parades happen and start to spread. And then Harvey Milk gets elected in 78 in San Francisco. And then we're really cooking with gas.
Yeah. What does Pride mean to you? Like, what are Pride celebrations for? Because I feel like it's changed over the years.
Visibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been in a lot of Pride parades. Actually, one year, Dykes of Hazzard rented a U-Haul and we drove it. Yeah, and we with like cardboard boxes that were like, "Move her in." And we were in the Toronto Pride Parade and proceeded to get the U-Haul towed at the end of it. By the way, just for the record. But you know, we used to do floats in the Buffalo Pride all the time. Dykes of Hazzard, whenever we always did things. And for me, it's the Louisiana in me and all of it. A parade is an opportunity to make a political statement while having fun and being visible. And to me, that Pride is saying, on this one day, we will make sure that you see us, you hear us, and that we gather as a community to let you know we're here. What does Pride mean to you?
I'm 37. My first Pride, I probably was in my early to mid 20s. And the Pride Parade in Boston is like Fidelity Float.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's literally just a parade of corporate sponsored floats, them throwing branded plastic things at you.
Right.
And besides that, it felt like a party.
Yeah, I would say that I think my Pride culture has always been like hand building unsponsored floats.
Yeah.
To say something. We had the Lesbianati one year. We had the Big Gay Tea Party one year where we built a boat, right? Like not sponsored things. But then you look at, and you know, this is the capitalism of it all, how much it costs to be visible.
Mm-hmm.
It's $500, $1,000 to put a float in a parade, in a Pride parade, right? So when we look at like, oh, why are corporations in Pride? Well, they're in Pride because Pride got so expensive that the average person couldn't participate in Pride anymore, right? Like it kind of goes back to capitalism. The reason we have all these corporate sponsorships is because the government said, well, if you want to do that, this permit's going to cost this. Or the Pride organization says, oh, you know, the cost of doing this is now we need this many people on the streets. We need this many cops that we have to hire. The cops are getting paid overtime to work the Pride parade. You know what I mean? Like it's just so much bigger than the economics is insane.
No, I hear you.
But should they be there?
Cops?
Cops. Yeah, should cops be at Pride?
Well, there's kind of been a lot of, I don't want to say maybe controversy, but a lot of discussion about what should be at Pride, what shouldn't be at Pride. One of the big ones is police. Personally, I mean, the first Pride parades, like we said, were to commemorate the Stonewall riots, was uprising against the unfair treatment of queer people by police. And now police are in the parades, which I don't love. I still feel like there is work to be done within the police force and how they treat people of color, how they treat queer people, how they treat gender nonconforming people, trans people. And I don't think they've done enough work to have a seat at that table, you know?
I've been struggling with the back and forth of we want to cancel a corporation who's no longer sponsoring a Pride event while simultaneously saying we want corporations out of Pride events. And I feel like that's been a real conundrum for the queer community recently is there's a lot of people every time, you know, and part of it is clickbait and media and wanting the likes on the internet, but you'll see articles that are like, oh, so-and-so pulled its Pride sponsorship. Then you'll see another article who's like, why are these corporations here anyway? And I don't think they should be here. But I'm also not sure that Pride needs to be a government-sanctioned event anymore right now.
Yeah.
Like, in similar to protest, if Pride is a protest, is it really a protest if you have to apply to the government to get permission to do it?
Right.
If you have to get a permit, you know, is it time to go back to organic? Is it about mob prides? Is it about going back to an organic gathering of people that happens, that's planned, but that isn't necessarily, that is more disruptive than permitted.
Right. I mean, when it comes to corporate sponsors in Pride, I feel like, yeah, we need the money, take the money, but I just hope people recognize and understand that corporations don't care about queer people.
Well, they don't care about anybody.
Yeah, they don't care about anyone. They care about making money, and the decisions that they make are to make money. They are going to give pride organizations money so that the people there will be like, oh, these people support us, we should support them. But they're not sponsoring prides isn't supporting queer people. It is it's advertising. It's trying to get you to give them money.
Not only is it advertising, they're only going to give you money if you're a 501c3,
Right.
90% of the time. They're doing it because it's a tax write-off that gives them free advertisement.
Right.
That's the game. You know, rarely does an organization that does not provide a tax relief to that corporation get funding.
Right.
That's the racket. It's all bullshit. You know, it's not like they're like, wow, this young group of artists is doing really great, incredibly creative art and breaking boundaries and making people think with their creativity. Let's fund them. It's not that. It's this organization will get me a tax write-off. And then hopefully the organization has the wherewithal to maybe hire an artist who will then have an opportunity to showcase themselves. But that's not usually what happens because these
Right.
organizations, and I run one, are busy running their organization. So what happens is a bunch of volunteers hop on a float with a bank t-shirt on and pride.
It just came out this week that multiple corporate sponsors have either pulled back and offered less funding or have stopped funding New York Pride at all.
Okay.
And they're about a quarter down, 25% down from their budget. Last year, there's a certain level of sponsorship. The highest level, they had 5 of them last year, and 4 of them have entirely backed out this year.
So what would you do in this situation? Like we have a funding shortage. If you go to their website, people who donate pop up and it tells you, oh, so-and-so just donated from, that's how New York City Pride is handling it.
Oh, like getting small donations?
It looks like they're getting small donations.
I think that's great.
I think that's great too.
I also does Pride have to be some outrageously overproduced event?
No. And I think that it would be really interesting to, I don't want to say limit how many people can go, but like give me a ballpark of what it costs per person to put on Pride, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me see the budget for all this. Cause I feel like that is something that would be, I've always been a big fan of sustaining monthly donorship. Like, I think that's the way that organizations should be funded. I think that if everyone can pitch in a little bit, feel free to become a monthly donor to Summer of Sass.
Oh, yeah.
If people can contribute a little bit. So I'd be interested to see what happens when you stop trying to court corporate money. I feel like it's been so ingrained in the process that the way we make things are thought about in that manner. And in the same way where like, let's upend it all and let's change term limits and all of that. Stop everything. Let's take a year off, right? Like not this year, next year, not this year. We fucking need to hang out and be gay together. But like, let's rethink all of it. And how are we going to do it in a way that is more community based and less corporate based without buying t-shirts?
Yeah, no plastic garbage either.
No plastic garbage.
No one needs royal blue Wayfarers with Fidelity on the side of it.
No, nobody does.
How do you feel about kink at Pride?
I've struggled with this one. I'll be honest with you. As someone who like, I've emceed fetish parties. I have a history. Like, I'm familiar with the community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm torn because I feel like while sex is a normal thing that should be on display, I guess, I wish there was a little kink at the St. Patty's Day parade.
Mm.
Like, I feel like if other parades had this element, that would make me more comfortable. And I know that's weird, but like we can't simultaneously say that homosexuals are hypersexualized when we're the only parade that's making sure there's a lot of sex and nudity in it.
Mm.
Right. And so I think that's where, and then, I mean, I guess the counter is there's always going to be boobs on a beer float, maybe.
Mm.
So I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel, to be honest. I feel like I feel like context does matter. I feel like why do we only have to have one parade?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there are multitudes. We contain multitudes as a queer community, and the idea that we're all going to fit into one parade is crazy, and we shouldn't have to. And that there should be different celebrations of different cultures. And there are. I don't know. I just don't, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have someone flogged on a float at noon in June.
That's kind of where I'm at with it, is I feel like there can be representation for kink and kink community in a pride parade without it being explicitly sexual.
Right.
Like, have a leather organization walking down the street
in leather. Yeah.
There can be representation of community based in kink without there being the sexuality of it.
Would a kink group accept in its membership someone under the age of 18?
No. Then
is there a need to advertise your kink membership exists to if I feel like if it's a thing that you wouldn't allow children to, is it a daytime event for everybody? But you don't think there should be kids at Pride.
Well, I mean, I think people, like, we'll go back to the leather community. It's like, yeah, I don't think they would allow underage minors into a leather community, but I think having your community represented in a pride parade is fine.
Yeah.
And I think because pride is about community, I think that kink community should be represented there.
Who shouldn't be at Pride?
People who
in the parade. Who should not be at Pride? Who do you see at Pride and you're like, no.
No one.
Everybody should be at Pride.
I think people that want to be a part of Pride and also want to really embody the spirit of Pride, which is togetherness, community, love, respect, support, should be there.
I had a group of protesters from Westboro Baptist Church.
Really?
Every Pride in Buffalo for like 3 years. Like, we had a relationship.
You're like, oh, hey.
They would film me.
You specifically?
The whole parade.
Right.
Like, they would set up, and their game is like, if you attack, they film everything. So that way, if you attack them, they can sue you in civil court. That's their game. That's what they do. And should they have been allowed to get a float? They were part of that Pride event every single year.
Yeah. I mean, like, no. But I feel like they're not there for community. They're not there out of respect. They're not there out of love. They're not, you know what I mean?
Okay.
They don't check any of those boxes.
All right. They did show up every year, and they did I shared obscenities with them every single year.
Work.
One year we had water balloons. So I didn't throw them at them, but I told everybody to throw them in the tree above them. So it would just rain on them. That was a fantastic time. Okay,
that's the fine line between assault.
I mean, that's what I feel like. I didn't throw it at you. I got heaved in your direction and you didn't move.
I don't know what to tell you.
This is just like a random thing that I'm going to share with you that I don't know if this... In 1987, homosexuality was determined to no longer be considered a mental disorder. Okay. And then in 1990, homosexuality was no longer considered a disease. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
For 3 years, it wasn't a mental disorder, but it was a disease. And I don't really understand that at all.
No, that's crazy. I do want to talk a little about Pride that has happened in Provincetown. So weirdly enough, I mean, Provincetown is one of the queerest places in the world, gayest places in the world.
Yes.
And we historically never had a Pride. There are other events in town that were like kind of stand-ins. We have a carnival event, which has a parade. So people kind of were like, oh, that's Pride Parade.
I mean, in fairness, our summer is an endless Pride.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. And a few years back, I want to say probably 2018, 2019, an organization in Provincetown decided that they were going to organize a Pride. And a lot of people kind of had the same sentiment that you just expressed, which is like, why do we need Pride? It's Pride all the time here. Who is this for? You know? And I was kind of one of those people at the beginning. And since Pride has been happening for 5, 6, 7 years now, I think it is so great.
I agree.
Because Pride is kind of a really amazing entry point for people. Pride is what a lot of closeted people, a lot of people who can't be fully out in their lives, is what they Google when they want to find a gathering of like-minded queer people. And I think what's incredible that about what Provincetown Pride has accomplished in the years that they have is it is such a much more diverse crowd than we're used to in Provincetown. There's a lot more people of color that attend our Pride than other events. There are a lot of younger people that attend Pride, and a lot of more, like, Provincetown isn't a very large trans community, is not a very large gender nonconforming community, but I feel like our Pride has attracted a lot of those people that should be a part of our community.
I think, yes, it has been Pride, and I think it has also been the general vibe in the country. I've noticed that even just this week, that there's been a few things, a concerted effort by our tourism and Provincetown Business Guild, etc. And then the climate of the country is such that, number one, if you are a gender nonconforming person, you don't want to travel out of the country right now.
No.
Even if you have a passport that has everything that matches your identity, you don't want to do that. And I think that's going to be reflected in our summer season, and we're going to see a lot of people from all over the gender spectrum and identity spectrum being here for our Pride and for our whole summer, frankly.
And I think that's really great. And
For sure.
I think that is the true goes back to what you were saying, that Provincetown is Pride all the time.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, those young people Google Pride to find a place where they can find like-minded people. Provincetown is that place. And I know there are a lot of boundaries and obstacles to being a part of this community, especially financially. But I do think it truly is a place that people can come to belong in.
Yeah, even if it's only for the day.
Yeah.
There is what Pride is. You know what? Now I can answer your question. What Pride is about to me is community. And it is about celebrating with people like you who feel the way you feel in a lot of ways, specifically regarding identity. Right? There is a myriad of life experiences at Pride, but there's one common denominator, and that is you gay.
Right. And it's also a place to feel like unfettered joy without worrying, if you're allowed to. Because queer joy is something that, I mean, how often do you hear like, oh, it's very tolerant? And that's what they are tolerant of, is queer joy.
Right.
And Pride and Provincetown, like, you are allowed to have endless amounts of queer joy without having to worry about people.
Without being shamed.
Yeah.
Even when maybe you should be a little ashamed. But we're going to let you go, girl.
Yeah.
You do you,
It's
boo.
Pride.
It's Pride. It's Pride.
Yeah.
It's Pride.
I'm really excited for Pride Month, and I think this one is going to be extra special because I think people should take a step back and really think about what it means to them and how they want to operate in this world as a queer person and a member of a queer community.
Should we make a new tradition?
Yeah.
Should we have a Pride resolution?
Ooh.
Do you know what I mean? Like, should we try to figure out how, as queer people moving into the future and in our new world, where we can reset at Pride?
Yeah.
And set some new intentions.
I love that.
Yeah.
Can we come up with, we'll do ours with breaking news
next week. Everybody think about what your Pride intentions will be for the last half of the year.
Thank you so much for listening to Queer Times. We're at Provincetown Recording Studio. A big thank you to our producer, Chad Rossi, as well as KT.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And follow, like, subscribe, do all the things, tell your friends, share.
Yeah, and we'll see you next week.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Yeah.
Love you.
Love you.
Really?
Bye.
Queer is in.